There's a misconception that to be a graduate student, you have to be good at reading. But I am not. I read slow, I get distracted easily, and if I'm being honest, I don't really actually like it. Yet here I am, a graduate student. So today I thought we should talk about some strategies for slow and distracted readers in graduate school. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel where we talk about everything grad life, grad advice, and research. And in today's video, we are discussing strategies for slow and distracted readers in graduate school. I checked on Google and it says the average reader reads about 1 page every 1 to 2 minutes. It takes me about an hour to read 20 pages. So it's safe to say I might be a little bit below average. So today I thought I'd share my strategies that have helped me get through and be successful in graduate school. So if you're somebody who doesn't necessarily see themselves as good at reading or don't particularly like reading, that doesn't necessarily mean grad school isn't for you. So today I'm sharing these strategies for slow and distracted readers because I am very much a slow and distracted reader, but I've had a lot of success in graduate school, and you can too. You may need to change your focus or your goals as trying to be a good reader for grad school, that it's not necessarily reading and understanding every single word, but rather being able to internalize or comprehend enough information to participate in academic coursework and academic discourse or conversations. Because at the end of the day, no matter how many books you read in grad school, there's no way you're going to remember every single word that every single author has said and why it was significant. So there shouldn't be this pressure on you to do that for your classes either. That's just not really realistic. So the first and simplest piece of advice for distracted or slower readers is to make sure that you're really working to have time management. But this is more than just planning out your readings and having the discipline to read them, but rather it is knowing your personal limits and your pacing. And by being able to do this, you can make realistic goals of how much you can read and in what time. So for me, I can only really read 40, maybe 60 pages a day. But as the week goes on, if I'm reading 40 pages back to back to back, that amount of productivity becomes less and less and less for me. So on Monday, I could probably read 60, but by Friday, you might be able to get 20 pages out of me. So I know with my time management, I need to forefront the readings that have the least amount of pages so I can get through as many readings as possible early on. So if I have 3 readings that are 20 pages and 1 reading that is 60 pages, I would read the 3 readings on Monday and then spread the 60 pages out Tuesday, Thursday, and Wednesday. Now there's no hard and fast rule for this. It's really just about what works for your personal limits and your pacing. And it is completely okay if you can't read 40 pages in one day. It took time for me to be able to build up my reading stamina to be able to read 40 pages a day. And even then, like I said, if it's later in the week, I definitely cannot finish that amount of pages. So when I say time management, it really is figuring out how to spread your readings out across time so you can manage the amount of reading versus scheduling out 5 hours for you to bust out 60 readings. That just may not always be realistic, especially if you're somebody who doesn't necessarily read fast or can focus on reading for long periods of time. Or if I do know I have to read something that is 60 pages in one day, I might spread it out across the day, where I give myself 2 hours in the morning to read 20 pages, then 2 hours in the middle of the day to read 20 pages, and then 2 hours before I go to sleep. This way, I'm not forcing myself to do something I know I can't necessarily always do. So through spreading it out or really distributing the workload, I'm able to make myself or help myself focus for shorter amount of times so I can internalize or comprehend what I'm reading. This next piece of advice is for my distracted readers in particular. I know when I'm reading something and I get distracted easy, I also kind of forgot what I just read. And so half of the battle for me is going back and remembering like, oh wait, what did that paragraph said? Or why am I reading this? Or this sentence didn't make sense. Now I have to go back and reread this whole page to make this sentence make sense. And that in itself is just a time waster. So something that's really useful for distracted readers is to take notes and to chunk up your readings in a way that you can kind of summarize as you go. So for me, I can do that maybe a paragraph at a time or a page at a time if I'm really like tuned in. But as you read, you just take notes to remind yourself this is what this is talking about, or this is why this is significant. And if you don't take notes on a paragraph, then you know, oh, that was a filler paragraph. It doesn't matter. It wasn't really that much information that I need. So by taking short little jotted notes like that, it can help you keep your pacing. So when you do get distracted, or even if you need to take a full-on break, you don't have to go back to jog your memory because you have your own notes. And what's even cooler about this is by having a sentence here or a sentence there of your thoughts or a summary of what the author is saying, when you're going into class, you have a pretty nice guideline of what you could possibly talk about in class with your peers or your professor. So then it's like a double whammy because you're not only getting through the readings, even though you might get distracted, but you're also preparing to have conversations in class. Now, this is completely different than taking full-on in-depth notes, and that's not necessarily what I'm suggesting. That's just not my personal style, so I don't really know what in-depth notes would look like for you all. I'm really just suggesting a simple sentence, like in this paragraph, they are arguing that purple is better than green. And then later on, I might say, oh, one reason purple is better than green is that Barney was mostly purple and only his stomach was green. So even though the author probably would say a lot more about what's going on, I know, okay, this is what they're arguing. This is the piece of advice they're suggesting or a piece of evidence they're suggesting to support that argument. I can keep it pushing. Also, what has been a major lifesaver for me in graduate school is finding out when I don't feel like reading, I don't necessarily have to read. I know some of us are familiar with resources like audiobooks, which may be available for certain readings if you're more in the humanities or if you're doing like literary type things. There may be an opportunity for, you know, the autobiography of Malcolm X to be an audiobook or something that you can find somebody reading out loud on YouTube. Or if you're doing Shakespearean sonnets, it's probably somewhere somebody out there is reading that. But for hardcore theorists or like more obscure readings, it'll be much harder to find audiobooks. But that doesn't mean that there aren't resources. So something that I do and has fundamentally changed my approach to doing my homework is by using Adobe's Read Out Loud feature. So if you have a PDF of a document, you can open it into Adobe and there's an option in there to have it read out loud to you. So if you're somebody who's a slow and distracted reader, but can listen to things all day or want to multitask like cook dinner while listening to your readings, then this becomes really, really useful because it can read it out loud to you. Now, if you don't have an Adobe Suite subscription, or if it's one of those weird scanned PDFs that for some reason it's not recognizing all the characters, another option is to put it into Word. Now, this is a little laborious if it's a really, really long reading, but if I'm reading something from online, or if it's a really long article on a website, or if it's an Adobe file that just for some reason isn't being recognized by Adobe, I will copy and paste every single thing that is in the reading into a Word document. And I don't worry about spacing or making it look nice or having it be structured or formatted in any way. I just make sure all the words in the original end up in a Word document. And then just like with Adobe, I just kind of click and move around to make it read out loud to me. And what's even cooler about Word is you can change who reads it to you, how fast they read it to you. Also, this is useful too if you've just done a ton of readings and you still have one more and you really need to get through it. You can increase the speed, you can change the voice so it's still interesting. And because, or if your eyes are tired, you also can just close your eyes and listen to what you're hearing, so you don't have to exhaust your eyes or feel exhausted or what have you. So it's been a really great resource for me in particular when I'm really exhausted or I just don't have the energy to focus on a computer screen any longer. This next suggestion, I think, again, I probably talked about in a past video, but when you are somebody who's not necessarily a fast reader or strong reader, what have you, it can be intimidating to have to approach all these readings on your own because you don't have feedback or you don't have anybody to kind of bounce ideas off before showtime and you're in the classroom. And so something that I think would be great for anybody, not just slow and distracted readers, but any type of reader or any type of student in graduate school, is to build a reading group or a working group. And basically what you would do in this reading group is that you would divvy up or distribute the workload. So if there's like 12 people in the class and you can make friends with 5 or 6 of them, you all would take the weekly readings and disperse it amongst yourself, where 2 people may read 1 reading, or 1 person might read half of this reading and the other person would read the other half. And then before class, you would come and discuss what you read, what were the major ideas, what you think would be useful for the class discussion, or what you think the professor would like to hear about these readings. So in this way, you are, 1, building a strong relationship with your peers and your colleagues, but you're also getting the information in a way that helps everybody lessen their workload, but also understand and grasp the materials. And because you talked about it before class, it also makes participating in class a little bit less daunting, and you get feedback on your thoughts and ideas. If you do like 2 people read 1 reading, 2 people read another reading, then y'all can bounce ideas off of each other to make sure that you're in the right path and you're not leading anybody wrong. I think this is also really just helpful when you're trying to remember things, because when you're reading, you're now not just reading for you, but you're reading for your community or your team. And so you also are trying to make sure you internalize or like memorize the major concepts and ideas so you can present it to them, because you don't want them to not do well in class either. Now, this can be a little hard if you're not an outgoing person and you're introverted, or if you just don't have like the friendliest cohort or your program's really cutthroat, but I would definitely suggest trying it out. Another strategy I would suggest is to pick and choose. And when I was coming up talking to a lot of graduate students, a lot of times when I heard pick and choose, they were really suggesting that you read the introduction, the conclusion, and then part of the middle somewhere in there. So if it's a book, you would read the introduction, you would read the conclusion, and then pick a chapter that seems most relevant to you or interesting to you, or most relevant to the class that you have to discuss it. I think this is a great strategy, even if the reading is a shorter article, because generally most authors are going to summarize what they are planning to prove in their introduction and how they're going to prove it. Somewhere in the middle is the evidence to teach you or to walk you through why their reasoning is correct. And then the conclusion is a summary of everything that just happened. So by bringing all of those things together, you get what they were going for, how they did it, and what they think was the value of that or the purpose. But I would go even further. When I tell other graduate students to pick and choose, I really mean pick and choose what you will and will not read. And I know this seems foreign because, again, in undergrad, you are expected to read everything. But for whatever reason, a lot of professors don't seem to understand or remember or take into account that most graduate students in this time and age are working full-time or at least part-time, have a full course load, and are still trying to apply to grants and fellowships and things like that. So gone are the days when you could be a full-time student and have a full scholarship and have your graduate program fully funded and have time to do all your schoolwork. So with that said, some professors assign a lot of readings that just aren't realistic. Reading a book a week for 3 different classes may not be sustainable for a lot of people. So When I suggest to pick and choose, I really encourage graduate students to read readings that seem directly related to their field or seem really interesting for them. And then for all the other readings that they won't have time to get to, you can do the other pick and choose where you just read the introduction, the conclusion, and the middle, like some part of the middle. Or if it's a larger book or a very common chapter, a very common article, you can read reviews. And that's kind of how I get through a lot. I can tell you all about Foucault's Discipline and Punishment. I have never read Foucault's Discipline and Punishment, but I have read a bunch of summaries, I've watched YouTube videos, I've done book reviews, and so because of that, I know what his main arguments are, I know the examples that he presents within his book, and I know his major takeaways that he wants the reader to have. And so when I enter into classroom spaces, I'm able to get into discussion or bring in my own perspectives because I understand the argument. And that is one of the most important parts of approaching reading as somebody in graduate school. The goal isn't to memorize every word, but instead you're working to have an opinion on it or an analysis of it or an understanding of what they're trying to put forth. And so with all that information, then you're able to participate in class discussion. So again, it's not really the most important thing that you read the whole thing and know everything that's going on, but rather have enough information that you can have an intellectual conversation. And I've also come to find out that certain readings, if they're really wordy, like Bourdieu's Habitus, when I read that, I didn't understand what he was saying, so I had to actually go and read a review. And then when I read the review, it made sense. And in that way, I read it like you're supposed to, but I wouldn't have been able to participate in class discussion because I didn't comprehend what was going on. So if you are doing things that let you understand and comprehend the readings, then you're doing what you need to do. And that's why pick and choose is such a powerful strategy, because you are legitimately picking out the most important parts so you can choose what to say or you can choose what to incorporate. So again, there's just two ways to approach pick and choose, and you can use them as you wish, but you can pick and choose from the readings what you're going to read from the introduction, something in the middle, and then the conclusion. Or like I do, pick and choose entire readings so I don't waste time reading things that I won't understand, that I don't enjoy, or that are irrelevant to me in my research. Reading in grad school can just be overwhelming, and then it gets compounded by the work, the social life, the expectations, your personal self-doubts, and everything else that can add up onto that. So if you're interested in hearing more grad advice, seeing more grad life, and hearing everything research, don't forget to subscribe. And if you found at least 2 things useful, hit that thumbs up. And as always, if you have any questions, video suggestions, or concerns, comment down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.